All right, welcome back. Today, we're going to connect the dots on our really big topic. How exactly do we become who we are? We're going to look at how we first learn about gender, the huge role our families play, and then how the wider world out there shapes our identity. So let's just jump right in. So I want to start with this question right here. Who taught you how to be you? I mean, really think about it for a second. It wasn't just one person or some single lesson, was it? Nope. It was this whole collection of experiences and messages and expectations that started, well, pretty much the moment you were born. And a massive part of that early learning, it revolves around these two concepts right here. You've got gender roles. Think of these as the scripts we're handed for appropriate behavior. You know, what we're told we're supposed to do. Then you have gender stereotypes, which are the beliefs we soak up about how guys and girls are just fundamentally different, who we're told to be. Okay, so let's start right there. Section 1 is all about this question. How do all these external ideas, these roles and stereotypes floating around, how do they actually become an internal part of who we are? Because here's the absolute key. Those roles and stereotypes, they're not just abstract ideas out there in the world. They become the actual building blocks that kids use to construct their own gender identity, that deep internal sense of who they are. So, where do we first get our hands on these building blocks? That brings us to Section 2. We're going to look at our most immediate, our most powerful environment, that inner circle of family. Now, this is a fantastic way to visualize all of this. Think of this as our map. It's Bronfenbrenner's model, and as you can see, the child is right there in the center. That first most important circle around them, the microsystem, that's where family lives. It is the most direct and honestly, the most powerful layer of influence in a child's life. And inside that family system, parenting styles are a gigantic factor. This chart breaks them down really nicely. It's basically a grid based on two things: warmth, affection and support, and control, which is all about the rules and discipline. And where those two things intersect, you get four pretty distinct styles. First up, you've got the authoritarian style. Just think, high control but low warmth. This is the classic my way or the highway approach. There are tons of rules, for sure, but not a lot of discussion or emotional connection to go with them. And then you have the authoritative style. Hear that difference? It's subtle, but it is so, so important. This one is also high on control. There are definitely clear boundaries and expectations, but it's matched with high warmth. It's all about setting rules while also being loving and responsive, which this image here just captures perfectly. It's not just about the one-on-one relationship between a parent and a child. The dynamic between the parents creates the entire emotional climate of the home. A stable, supportive partnership, that gives a kid a real sense of security. But ongoing conflict, it doesn't matter if the parents are together or divorced, that creates stress and instability. And this brings us to one of the biggest, most important takeaways from all the research. When you look at all the different kinds of families out there, single parent, same-sex parents, grandparents raising kids, you name it, the conclusion is always the same. The specific structure of a family is way less important than the quality of the relationships inside it. Okay, it's time to zoom out. For Section 3, we're moving into the next layers of our map. We're looking at the influence of the outer world, everything from media to our friends and teachers. Let's be real, media is a super powerful teacher. From a really young age, it's constantly showing us models of how to be. It's reinforcing those stereotypes we talked about, and it uses incredibly targeted marketing to tell us what we should want and what we should like, all based on our gender. And here is a perfect example of that. Look at this. On the left, deodorant for men, you got the dark colors, the sharp geometric design, a bold, blocky font. Then on the right, for women, it's all lighter colors, softer curves, a flowing script. It's literally the same type of product, but the messaging couldn't be more different, reinforcing a whole bunch of stereotypes about masculinity and femininity. But of course, it's not just the media. Our friends, our peers are hugely influential. The playground, a sports team, an after-school program. Think of these as social laboratories. They're where kids learn how to negotiate, how to cooperate, and how to figure out who they are in relation to everybody else. And we absolutely cannot forget about teachers. A great teacher does so much more than just teach reading and writing. They manage a really complex social environment, helping kids develop these critical life skills like self-regulation, learning how to manage their emotions, and how to collaborate with others. All right, so we've looked at identity, we've looked at family, and we've looked at the wider world. In this final section, let's put it all together and really see how nature and nurture dance with each other. So if you look at the data from your reading, you see this pattern here. On average, and that's a key phrase, boys tend to score higher on certain spatial skills tasks, like mentally rotating an object in their mind. At first glance, it seems like a pretty clear difference, right? But that is not the whole story. Not even close.
Because here is the kicker. These differences are hugely influenced by the environment. The moment we account for socioeconomic status, we're talking about things like access to good schools, to books, to educational toys. That gap in spatial skills can shrink dramatically. It's a perfect example of how nurture shapes what looks like nature.
Here's another really interesting, complex example, ADHD. The diagnosis ratio is about 3-to-1, males to females. But this might not just be a simple biological difference. It could also be because the symptoms show up differently. And, this is really important, it could be a social bias in how we're trained to recognize and diagnose those symptoms in boys versus in girls. Which brings us right back to our map. This is really the main idea that ties this entire explainer together. Our development is never a simple case of A causes B. It is a constant, messy, dynamic interaction between us, the individual, and all of these nested systems around us, from our family all the way out to our culture. So, I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. As you think about all this stuff, ask yourself this. If our development is so profoundly shaped by all these systems around us, where does our own individual agency, our power to choose and create our own path, where does that fit into the picture?